Hola, direct, hello, guten tag, bonjour, and you're very welcome into Study Hub for episode 6. And if you're new to us, this is the weekly podcast where we gently guide you through the Leaving Cert exams. And as well as this pod, check out our social streams, which are full of extra resources, information, tips and strategies. And we are so pleased that so many of you have found us already. And you found us on platforms like TikTok, where we've racked up over 600,000 views. How many views? 600,000 views. So there's really good content there, just little nuggets of knowledge that we hope will help you along. But back to this week's pod, and what joys have we got lined up for you? Well, today it's one of the big ones. I know I always say this, but this really is one of the big ones. It's Gaeilge Poire, though, which is filled with poets and prose and all the shanachal that you can wave a stick at. But it's a joy because, of course, you also get to watch movies and study great plays just like this one.
Fake solas ni gali and din of argus gal lodge dishkin a howan. I'm fine to a kurux an air.
Is even om de crutch kantje?
Oh, is Phyllis give shaw wira? Phila fado. Octo makes you go on you. Skew she done all in futsal.
Oh, a Fodrig.
Oh, a Fodric. Love it on Streal there, of course. We hope you're testing yourself there while listening to that. Then we will turn our attention to physics. And that gives us an excuse to examine the idea of the multiverse and just how many Evelyns might be out there.
I'm not your husband. I'm another version of him from another universe. I'm here because we need your help.
Very busy today. No time to help you.
Across the multiverse, I've seen thousands of Evelyns.
Some people's worst nightmare, thousands of Evelyns, from everything, everywhere, all at once there. And then art, and for many of us, the most important subject. Because one day you will find yourself in an art gallery, age 90, and you'll still be able to truck out these phrases, the philosophies you learnt back in your art class, when most of the subjects will have faded away.
But if Botticelli never had in mind the full-blooded arousal of all those who looked at his sensationally famous Venus arriving naked on the beach, which he didn't, what exactly was he after?
The irrepressible Valdemar Unišek, art critic and writer there. So Gaeilge Physics and Art for you today. And also we just want to give a quick mention for our music students that the Dún Laoghaire Choral Society were in touch with us, and their website is dlcs.ie, and they are running a beautiful concert on the 24th of March. The concert of Vivaldi and Bach is on at 4:30 p.m. in the Church of the Assumption in Dalkey. But at 3 o'clock, their conductor, John Doyle, will be running through the Leaving Cert music exam with students. Students are welcome to come along from 3 o'clock for just €5, and they'll get a masterclass in the music, some of the music syllabus for music Leaving Cert. So that's 3 o'clock on the 24th of March. So we just wanted to say that to you. But let's get back to the upper today, and we are going to get on with our Gaeilge. And to guide us through Poire, though, we're joined by Shane de Poire from the Dublin Academy. Shane, you're very welcome to the programme.
It's great to be here.
Céad míle fáilte now. Like so many of our conversations here, let's start with kind of just that format, that idea of giving us the structure of the paper, because we know it's a busy paper with lots of writing ahead.
It definitely is. Irish paper 2 is the marathon, I call it anyway. 3 hours and 5 minutes. We have 4 questions, 4 sections if you want to call them as such. We have reading comprehensions, which are 100 marks, which account for 17% of the grade. We have the question 2 next, which is the prose section. That accounts for 30 marks, which is 5% of the grade. We have the poetry section, again 30 marks and counts for 5% of the grade. And finally then the section number 4, I like to focus on Trial, the drama, and that is 40 marks, and that is 6.5% of the grade.
Great. So talking through then, what kind of timings am I looking at? How am I chopping up all this time?
Okay, you want to spend the bulk of your time obviously on the reading comprehensions. They, to me, are most important because I think they're the easiest place to
and yet they're the bit they talk about the least. They'll bore the backside if you talk about the poets.
Exactly.
But actually the reading comprehensions,
oh, absolutely. The reading comprehension.
You.
The answers are in front of you. It's always nice when you can just pluck the answers in front of you. So I would spend 45 minutes on both comprehensions, so that would be 90 in total. Moving on then, I would go to the prose. The prose I would spend 25 minutes on. It tends to be usually one question, and that's why I would give that 25 minutes. The poetry section of the exam has 3 questions, 1 long, 2 short, so I would give that 30 minutes. I would try get the 2 short questions done inside maybe 6 minutes and spend the remaining 24 minutes on the longer question. And then at the end, you have on Trial, 40 marks, 40 minutes. That's what I would
Now, you've talked about the reading comprehension and you really are keen to hammer home on this. So let's, talk about it for a minute. You've strategies here because you're saying you've already mentioned the answers are in front of them. Talk us through approaching this and what students can do to make this work for them.
Okay, so in the exam, the first thing I would do is I would read the title to make sure, you get the hint of what's going on.
Okay.
They used to provide pictures, and not as much anymore now, but read the title, make sure you kind of get an idea of what it's about. From that point, I would skim down through the questions very quickly and I would mark the keywords in every question. I would look at which paragraphs my 6A grammar questions are. Just to explain that, you have to identify 2 pieces of grammar, so you'll need to know what paragraph to look in and where to find them. 6B, everyone's least favourite question and probably the most poorly answered question. 6B is an opinion question as such.
They dread that because they're afraid they're going to get it wrong.
Yeah, they do. And the big thing the reason why probably people get it wrong is that maybe they're not answering it properly. It says in bold writing, in your own words. Yet a lot of people take that as a suggestion. It's not a suggestion. You're allowed copy and paste answers 1 to 6A from the comprehension. We're very generous. We want you to do well. Find it, take it, steal it, put it on paper. So 6B, you have to use a bit of your own Irish there.
But you can use the language in it, but twist it, change tenses
absolutely.
And things like that. You're smart about it.
Oh, absolutely. You let's say, for example, you have 2 verbs in the sentence. What I would tell my own students to do is look at the second verb in the sentence and make that the first verb in the sentence.
So give us an example then.
Okay.
Testing you now, go on.
Glocca porcha. He is taking part.
Okay.
I would start the sentence, instead of a glocca porcha, I would use glock as the verb. I would have that as the root of my sentence and I would say glock she porcha.
And that's enough of a change?
Absolutely. You've taken out your tishel up there and you've now changed your verb around.
The tishel right. Moving on, we're going to want prose there, okay? So there are 5 pieces to study, 2 will appear. So again, guide us through this. What's the approach for this?
So 2 will appear this year. They have a choice again, which is great. Because the students have a choice, there are 5 pieces to prepare. Because there's a choice, mathematically speaking, you only have to prepare 4 to be safe, to be covered. So that will cut
ding,
your
ding, ding. We love that in Study Hub.
Yeah,
go on, yep.
Absolutely.
Cheap sound effects. Good.
Exactly. From that point onwards, what I would look at then is that my own view on it is they've never repeated any question 2 years in a row. The exam's running close to 13 years now. Nothing has been repeated 2 years in a row. So that should, kind of indicate to students what is important and what isn't important. Focusing on the different pieces themselves, they're all different pieces. Treat them as 4 unique pieces. What I ask my students really to do is to get 20 nouns, to get 20 adjectives maybe, and about 10 verbs they're really comfortable with based on each piece, and to use those as moving pieces to describe, and the key thing is here, the characters. You're not really dealing with...
You're very keen that people get this message. Not themes, it's about characters.
Yeah, it's about characters. Like you're reading you're reading kind of short stories, you're reading the first chapter of a novel, you're looking at a short film. It's the characters that we want, and we're talking about what they're like and what their behaviour is usually.
So know those traits, know all those personality quirks, all that kind of vocabulary around the personality.
And if they've done all that hard work, you may as well get the full marks by making sure you don't write a summary. That is what we don't want. We don't want, when I'm correcting the Leaving Cert, I don't want a summary of what happened. I want you to address the words of the question at the start and at the end of every paragraph, and then those same examples that would be a summary for you anyway are now relevant because you're actually answering the question.
So no a whimera. Now, Raggedy Filiocht and poetry, and again, this is, people will always talk about poetry in English and Irish. I find it fascinating how they're so obsessed with it. Yeah. 5 options here and 2 will appear. You would make the note again, they haven't repeated, I think.
No poem has come up 2 years in a row. No prose has come up 2 years.
So what do I need to learn to handle the poetry part of the papers?
Okay, well, let's start with the easy stuff first of all. Most of the time they're going to offer you a question on the life and the works of the poet. I think there's 1 poem that has no poet for Anspalpine Phonics, so for the other 4 it does have a poet. So because of that, you need to know the life and the works, and I would say make your life easy. If you know the marking scheme clearly indicates you need to know the poet's name, you need to know 1 fact about his or her life, 1 previous work they have composed, and then finally another point is something about their life or something about their works. So I'm big on this. 4 sentences will get you your marks. Don't write any more. It's a waste of time. Spend your time and energy on something that's more important.
Now, talk through, because I loved this about the 9-mark question, right? Where you're saying don't overwrite, and you've just mentioned there the 4 sentences. You break that down. I mean, you say students will start writing reams of stuff for this.
Half a page.
And you're like, 4 lines, do it. I love this. So tell us how, the full name, for example, of the poet.
Yeah, the full name, and
you get a mark for that.
Oh, you do get the mark for getting the poet's name correct. And unfortunately, if you get the poet's name wrong and everything else is right, you get 0. So the poet's name is very, very important.
All the I's.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
So we got to get that
full
right.
name, then another sentence about a piece of work they've done. There's another 2 marks there.
Yes, absolutely. You will get marks for saying where they're born. So if you want to say...
So it's not a big half-page raw mate, right?
No, it should be done inside 2 lines if you know what you're doing, inside 30 seconds, and spend your time and energy on the more difficult parts of the question, which would be the longer question, if I'll move on to that next.
Yes, because I was going to ask you, like, how much am I writing for paper 2?
That's a good question. I suppose it depends on handwriting. Big thing is when you start a new question, first of all, I want a new page. It clearly indicates that in the answer booklet. So if you're finishing reading comprehension,
there's no shortage of paper. Like.
Oh, absolutely not. If it's at the one time we are going to be, careful with
Move
paper.
on
and the
with the
environment,
paper, yeah.
For your Leaving Cert, nice and tidy, make it presentable. What I would say to students is probably 2 to 3 pages per comprehension as a minimum.
Okay.
For the prose question, I'd say 1.5 to 2 pages. For the poetry,
that's kind of a sweet spot, isn't it?
Page and a half
doesn't
to
feel
2.
overwhelming.
And remember, for students, if you're preparing 2 A4 pages, we write in A4 pages, the answer booklet pages are smaller.
Yes.
So it'll look longer, and that's okay as well.
Okay, now let's move on. You mentioned there drama. We had a little clip from Montreal there, Mairead Groddy there, but you want students to be aware of the wording of questions to answer that question accurately.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, there's no problem having material pre-prepared. Like, let's be honest, studying for any language, you're going to have material that's pre-prepared, and that's absolutely fine. The key thing is there is a question.
Right? But
yeah,
they
know.
But they have to ask something around it.
We're not terribly mean people, examiners. We know how the system works and we understand it. But there is a question there.
Examiners are so nice.
I know
they just want to give the marks.
All the time.
Go on.
You got to answer the question. Like, there's a question there. It's not a suggested question where you're like, you can or you can't answer. You have to answer the question. The question will be, about a character in the play. Look, it has to be Moira. Moira has to factor into it somehow. Moira is the main character, and everything else really revolves around her.
So just know her, know the person, and just have the vocabulary ready to go around her.
Exactly. And the main thing again is you're not writing a summary. We all know what happens start, middle and end. Discuss the characters, and for me, I tell my students, discuss the behaviour of the characters. Tell me how they
discuss the character to you means discuss the behaviour of the character.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Discuss what they
did. So don't give you a summary of what happened to Moira, but tell me about her action.
I'll give you an example. Poire is, the author of Everything Bad in Moira's life in this play. And if you want to tell me, if you want to tell me he was meant to be a priest, he was kicked out of the priesthood, all that, that's not helping your grade. That's just summarising who the character is.
Because they know you've learnt that off and you're just...
Exactly. Focus about how he lies to her and he leads her on and he gives her fake promises.
So the action of the actual story as opposed to
Absolutely.
telling us the story. Okay.
Yeah.
Can we talk about ordinary level for a minute? Because
Absolutely.
obviously so many students do ordinary level. Key aspects that students should identify here for you. What are they honing in now on this, do you think?
So paper 1 there is 4 questions. They can write a blog, they can write a short story, they can write a letter, they can write a conversation. What I get my students at ordinary level to do very simply is we learn 5 topics, and between these 5 topics it's going to be an accident, it's going to be a game, it's going to be a concert, a theft and a holiday.
Okay.
You learn those 5 topics 9 times out of 10 between the blog, between the short story or the letter. They usually appear. And remember, at ordinary level, we want you to do well at ordinary level.
So if you learn off those kind of areas, you're going to be able to manipulate that to fit the questions.
If you learn about going to Spain...
And it feeds into paper 1 then, your ashtas and...
Yeah, if you learn about going on holidays to Spain, a lot of the same vocabulary is going to be applicable for a trip to the Gaeltacht.
Okay.
Once you get the weather.
Yes, and brish you the chus and all that kind of malarkey. Okay.
Exactly.
Concern here always is that students are going to misinterpret a term. That they're going to get something wrong and then that'll hammer them all the way through the exam answer, right?
Yeah.
What is your advice around that?
Paper 1 and paper 2 are very different advice. Paper 1, you really have to be careful. Paper 1, we really don't want to give anyone a 0 on the essay.
But it's about precision.
Yes, exactly. So like I'll give you last year's exam as an example. There's a word there, agor, which means something that's wrong, unfair, unjust. Many students didn't answer it. It was the easiest question on the paper. It's basically
because of that term. They weren't sure.
And they didn't go for it. And I would say for paper 1, be cautious. Don't jump in and answer something you're not fully sure of because you could be punished. Whereas on paper 2, you know the story of Cock and Millish. Right. You know the story of the poem Gavin. You know what's going on, so you can take a good educated guess about what that question could mean based off what person. But on paper 1, it can be about anything. It's about current affairs. So who knows? So just be careful on paper 1. Whereas paper 2, you could throw maybe a bit of caution to the wind.
Are you saying they're not going to ask a madly trick question in paper 2?
No, it has to be based on what the story's about.
Okay, so go for it with that. Anything else you want to throw into the mix?
Top
tip.
My top tip.
For free on our podcast that I
okay,
my thousands in a grind school for. Go on.
My top tip for Irish paper 1, the essay, is They've loads of them. They have an hour and 50 minutes, right? To write Irish paper 1, the essay. Make sure you stop and read over your material all the time. Don't have mistakes in it, because I get my students to stop after each paragraph, read over, because at the end of any exam, what does anyone want to do? They want to find that door and they want to get out as quick as possible. Paper 2, there's only 5 marks for grammar in each question. And I'm really not docking you for your shavies and your errors. I'm docking you for poor sentence structure. So keep your sentence structure good. And if there's an odd shave or an uru or a fada missing on paper 2,
it's a different emphasis.
We'll live.
Okay, love it. Listen, Shane, Gormila Magat, Shane de Poire from the Dublin Academy. Gormila Magat Asocht Shin. Next up, we switch our attention to physics, and we have an old pal of the show. Not old man, he's a pal who's been with us for a long time.
Old man as well, yeah.
The joy being in a podcast studio. Nobody can tell, Kieran. Nobody can tell. Kieran Mills, Physics and Applied Maths from Dublin Academy as well. Kieran, great to see you back.
Thanks, Evelyn.
Now, we're going to start again at the basics with you. If you could take that question first, that format, that duration of the paper for students, please.
Well, it's a 3-hour paper, 400 marks. It's made up of 2 sections. Section A, which is the experimental section, and Section B, which is theoretical. I always tell students when they go into the exam, don't read the entire paper.
Really?
Like you're gonna sit there.
You get that from other subjects. They say sit down.
I know, but I mean, you
put your feet on the desk, settle in.
Yes, you read the entire paper and you look beside you, and someone's already finished one question. So, Section A and Section B are mutually exclusive.
Okay.
So there's no point. Section A is also a little bit easier.
Okay.
So it's a nice kind of warmer up.
Settle the nerves.
Yeah, settle the nerves.
Yeah.
You know, you're just drawing graphs, you're drawing label diagrams or whatever. So it's a lot easier. And it is a nice way to settle the nerves. So I'd start off with Section A. You've got to do 3 questions out of 5.
Okay.
You've done these experiments in the lab, hopefully. So you'll have a great knowledge, a great understanding of them. Can you leave out any experiments?
How did you know I was going to ask you that question?
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that later, actually.
Okay. Well, look, you have an example from last year's paper, I think it was, where you talked about, the example was draw a labelled diagram of the apparatus, indicate the distance on your diagram. I mean, there's a lot of fiddly work to be done too to get those marks. Yeah,
so I'd say, what are the essentials that I need to be able to do the experiments?
Yeah.
And these are the essentials. I wouldn't even walk into the exam if I didn't have these essentials in my head.
Okay.
And there's 3 main essentials. And the first thing you've got to have is a label diagram of every single experiment.
That's it. You have to.
That's it.
It's non-negotiable.
Every single experiment starts off, draw a label diagram of the experiment. So draw a label diagram of the apparatus used. That's easy to do.
Okay.
We're talking about 25 experiments. So learning 25 diagrams, all fully labelled, no problem. No problem at all. Then the second thing, you're either going to have to draw a graph or do a calculation.
Okay.
Now, they'll always use the word suitable graph.
What does that mean?
So that's important. So you might, let's say, do Snell's law,
okay,
which you're familiar with.
Of course.
And they'll give you a series of results of angles of incidence and angles of refraction, I and R. And if you draw a graph of I against R, you'll get practically no marks. So you need to know that I've got to find the sine of each angle,
okay,
and draw a graph of sine I against sine R. So that's important. So that's essential information. For every single experiment, I've got to know exactly what is the suitable graph, what does the graph look like. And
are you saying it's 8 to 10 steps per experiment? Is that a kind of a rough yardstick?
Well, that's the method, yeah.
Okay.
So you'll never have to write out the method. You might have had to write it out 20 years ago,
okay, but
not anymore. So you don't learn the method. So you learn you know what your suitable graph is, or you may have to do a calculation. And if that's the case, that's a formula from your table book. So you'll know where that is. And then the last thing you'd need to know, maybe 3 or 4 experimental details. And what I mean by experimental details are errors and precautions. Precautions that you would take to make your experiment better, or errors that may be in your measurements. So know 3 or 4 of them. And that's your essential information. I tell students, do not go into the exam hall unless you have that in your head.
And that's Section A nailed, right?
That's Section A nailed.
Then we head into Section B, which is the theoretical stuff.
Let me just say a couple more things, Evelyn, about Section A.
Yeah. You want me to get a H1 here? Love it, yeah.
Yeah, we want to get our H1, don't we?
Of course we do.
So I'd say then, you talked about the method earlier.
Yes.
Maybe 8 to 10 steps.
Yeah.
I would read that a couple of times.
So know it, right?
Yeah, know
what's happening.
Don't learn it. You won't have to regurgitate it on the day in the exam. You won't have to write it out. But just know and be familiar with it. And if you've done the experiments in the lab, that'll be a great help as well, because I just might ask you something about the experiment. How did you measure the mass of ice, for example?
Okay.
You'll just know that. And then the last thing I would do to get your H1 would be just practice 2 Leaving Cert questions on all those 25 experiments, and then you've practically nailed it.
Has the course changed recently, or has it been in its current state for quite a while?
Oh, it's been in its current state since, I think, 2003.
Okay, because what happens is when I talk to teachers like yourself is sometimes they go looking for the dark corners in the curriculum. You know, there's always going to be that little surprise, you know what I mean, with that kind of...
Well, there will be, of course, and you can never predict. Just because they haven't asked it for 20 years doesn't mean they're not going to ask it.
Yeah.
So when students give out and they go on the Joe Duffy show giving out about this and that because
which
they
we
haven't asked that for
encourage.
20
We encourage people to go on the Joe Duffy show.
Well, it's in the syllabus, so
one of our favourite shows.
It's in the syllabus, so it's got to be done.
Okay, talk
but
to me
that's
about
nailed section A, yes.
Section B. Okay,
Section
this
B.
is theoretical stuff. Talk to me about this.
So I finished section A. I'm feeling happy now.
Yep,
because I'm relaxed. I've just
Delighted.
drawn a few graphs. I'm into section B. This is, I suppose, the theoretical section. I've got to do 5 questions out of 9.
Okay, what's my timing here now? How much time do I have for this?
I would have said for section A, 1 hour.
Okay.
Max.
So I have 2 hours
That's
now.
3. That's 3. Yeah, with 2 hours left. So that's 3. From section A, you're talking about 3 questions, 20 minutes max per question. If you finish after 45 minutes, don't say I'm going to do another question. Just move on.
Yep.
You can go back later and do your extra question if you want. So I'm talking about 2 hours, probably getting about 20 to 25 minutes per question.
Okay.
It's actually quite generous, physics. You're not under the same kind of time pressure as something like applied maths. So I never
This
hear...
is the ad for physics. Go on, I'm liking it. Go on, yeah.
So,
I mean, it's a dawdle, really, physics for Leaving Cert.
When I give my talk, it sounds so easy.
You make it sound easy.
It sounds so easy. The next thing I would do, so after I finish section A is, again, I'm not going to read the paper. I'm going to go straight to question 6.
Okay.
I want every student in the country to do question 6.
Why?
Question 6 is made up of 12 short questions. You've got to do any 8 out of 12. And it's really short.
So you're plucking the points. You're getting marks there for flying along. Okay.
And I don't even think about the timing of this. I tell students, go to question 6. It's parts A to L. Write down on your paper part A, skip 4 lines, part B, all the way down to part L, and be filling it in throughout the exam. It's a great way of jogging your memory about all kinds of things.
Yeah.
It's definitions about the entire course, mechanics, electricity, modern physics is all in there. So you might say, okay, I can do 4 right now, and later on I'll go back to it. When I finish another question, I'll go back to it. So you just keep going back to it. I think you have to do that question.
Okay.
It's a nice question.
What else am I doing?
So then after that, then you've got 4 questions left. So now you're picking, now you'll read through. You'll obviously be looking for your favourite questions, you know, your electricity or mechanics or whatever it is. Question 7 is always a big question on mechanics. So if you're a student who loves mathematics and loves applied maths.
You'll know yourself. That's your instinct,
you'll gravitate towards that.
Yeah.
That's where you'll want to go. But there's other nice questions as well in there. The very last question, question 14, is very nice. I always encourage students to do that as well. It's a 4-part question and you've got to do 2 out of 4 parts. And they're half questions. So because they're half questions, they can't really ask you anything too deep or involved.
Yes.
Like they could in a full electricity question or a full heat question. So they're a lot easier. So it's a nice question to do. It's a very popular question. It's probably one of the best answered question, the most answered question on the paper.
Okay, what is your final tip, Kieran?
My final
tip for a physics student tearing their hair out. You make it seem so easy, mind you.
Yeah, I do. And it is... Actually, the paper in the last few years is quite nice. It's testing a lot of skills. It's actually
that's the hard bit.
it's actually designed very well.
Okay.
My final, I would like students also to do what's called the STS, Science, Technology and Society.
Okay.
Or what I say to students, the real life physics question.
That sounds great.
Yeah, it's a nice question. It's probably question 13.
Okay.
Though they might move around a little bit.
Okay.
And it gives you a lovely paragraph. A paragraph about the disaster in Chernobyl,
okay,
or something like that. And you read the paragraph, and then you usually have 8 parts to do.
Okay.
And often 2 answers may be contained in the paragraph. So it's a nice question to do.
So if you're clever about it, that can work really well for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Kieran Mills, thank you so much for joining us today with your expert eye and notes and views on physics for us. And Kieran Mills joins us from the Dublin Academy of Education. I'm kind of torn today because Gaeilge Pauper Day is really a favourite of mine, but art is also another favourite of mine. But now Kieran's made me think physics is actually my favourite. So we're joined now by Declan Kelly from the Institute of Education. Declan, you have a job now to make me fall back in love with the art paper, because physics now is championing that for me. But I mean, art is amazing at this point. There's so many components to it. Let's go straight into it. The practical course students are knee deep in all that. Talk to us about that.
So the practical students, yeah, if anyone's listening and they're worrying and they're kind of coming to the nitty gritty part of getting it all done. There's probably students out there stressing at the moment. My biggest piece of advice to them would be to get out of that booklet, finish off what you need to finish. Don't worry about having everything perfect. I see this even with my own students. They want everything perfect. They want it like a magazine. It doesn't need to be a magazine. It's a workbook. It's a sketchbook. If you're worried about it not looking perfect, feel free to jump on the internet, look at old masters and look at their sketchbooks. They have coffee stains. They have little crazy notes.
Which everybody loves, right?
Yeah, I mean, one of my favourite things was we had some of the Da Vinci codices in the National Gallery a few years ago. Right. And one of my favourite little moments of those sketchbooks is when we kind of have Da Vinci on this pedestal. He's a deity in art, but he has these fantastic little drawings of cats and cats licking themselves and hissing and you get an idea of the person.
It's kind of doodling,
exactly. And he's clearly, he's probably ruminating on war machines and fortresses and paintings that he's going to test out. But there he is, looking at a cat in the corner, having a giggle to himself. So don't be scared.
So bring that joy into it, is what you're saying.
Throw your ideas into the booklet. Stop worrying about creating this perfect thing. It's not meant to be perfect. It's meant to be an exploration. It's an investigation. Show that you're trying things out. Dare to fail. It's okay to make mistakes. I know people are terrified of the word fail, but it's okay to make mistakes. In fact, the examiner will want to see you trying things out. Put that paint in, try different types of paint, your watercolours, your gouache, your acrylic paint. Try out the different things. Don't worry so much. As you progress, it will get better, as is life. But it's important to put those things in there. So that's my biggest piece of advice at the moment for people working on the booklets. Finish up those booklets now, and get on to the final artefacts. You're kind of worrying about, if you're starting to get bogged down, it's kind of, even from when I make artwork, you can get to a certain point with a painting, for example, where I can keep working on this and I can spend another 10 hours on it and get it 1% better. But those 10 hours are much better spent on something else. So move on.
Because it's not a gallery piece. You are in an exam structure, so be aware of that.
Exactly.
It's a bit like Portrait Artist of the Year.
Exactly.
The clock is ticking and she's desperately trying to get the nose finished or whatever.
You've a lot to do. And the examiner recognises that. The examiner appreciates that you're under time pressure to finish. And the recommendation is 30 hours. That's a lot of work to get done within 30 hours of class time. Yeah. And people have lives and people are ill and, they're busy with other subjects and projects and everything else. There's a lot to balance there.
And they know that.
They know. So stop worrying so much about doing everything perfect. Move it on.
Okay, I've done my booklet.
Okay.
And I'm now moving into the exam hall part. Talk to me about this. Section A, Section B, Section C. Section A, is it fair to say it's the equivalent of the unseen poetry in the English exam?
That's exactly how I would describe it.
Oh, I see. Amazing.
You've a super researcher.
Amazing, isn't it?
We call it today's world, but it is just a case of it's just like unseen poetry.
Okay. So how long is this paper then? It's 2 hours?
The entire paper, 2.5 hours.
2.5 hours.
So in the old system, in the old way, kind of meet the new boss, same as the old boss. You would want to take about 45 minutes per section. So section A, B, C. Now, oddly enough, I would recommend starting with B and C.
Why?
Because they are your chunky essays. They're the kind of 2-page essays that you want to do. Now, obviously, as we heard earlier on, depending on the size of your writing, the diagrams you're going to use, and when I note diagrams, in the new system, you don't necessarily have to provide diagrams. However, when you want to describe something, let's say, like a corbelled vaulted ceiling in Newgrange, it's very difficult to write down a paragraph of what that looks like. Okay. It's much easier to just draw a picture.
Hey, it's the art exam.
Exactly.
So don't be scared to illustrate it.
And sometimes when you make a drawing, it reminds you, oh, that's that thing, and that's and then you kind of get double marks, and if you think about it,
ding ding, look, double mark.
So that's a nice cheeky way of kind of helping yourself remember things. So I would say do the 2 essay questions first. If you haven't finished a question and you're kind of coming to the end of the 45 minutes, put a pin in it.
Listen, can we say that for all the papers? Like, there comes a point, I have this conversation again, like, stop, move on and go back.
100%.
you're killing yourself,
Yes.
and you're losing time on another section.
Exactly.
You can go back.
Go back then to your today's world, the new section A, and do those short questions. Now, on that note, and it's come back again and again, there are 7 questions, 7 short questions. Now, short, sometimes it's a few words, and sometimes it's a small paragraph. You only have to answer 5 of them. You can answer more if you want, but you only have to answer 5. A lot of people spend more time pulling their hair out.
Yep.
I used to have some of that. And they just do the 5 questions. And again, if you have the time left, you can go back and have a go at your essays.
Can I ask about Newgrange?
Yes, of course.
You have tricks for Newgrange, I gather.
Okay, so it's one of the potential questions that could come up. There's a few mnemonic devices
This
there.
is what, Section C, Ireland and the
Exactly.
world. Okay.
Ireland and a wider world. And of course, there's lots of other sections like the manuscripts and the high crosses and all that jazz. However, let's say you're doing Newgrange or Nouth and Doubt. There are ways of trying to remember the information. So how many times does a winter solstice happen in a year, you might think? And of course, the answer is it happens once a year. And how many weeks are there in a year? There are 52. So that might be a way of remembering. There are curbstone. You've got curbstone 1 and you've curbstone 52. They're the 2 most important curbstones. Just using that knowledge of there are 52 weeks in a year. Simple little mnemonic devices like that. I mean, art is you have to find the things that work for you. So
Yes.
there are principally, let's say, when we talk about Newgrange, you have to be aware that there are other megalithic tombs that you might be asked to talk about, and our locations, and that's important. So you might get a question. Again, we don't know what the questions are exactly, but you might be asked to compare 2 megalithic tombs, 2 different ones from different locations, for example. So I like to make up a little story where you've been caught robbing a potato-based fried food, which is a wedge, okay? Just for whatever reason. So this is what I use. You've been caught robbing wedges, and now you have to go in front of the judge, and he resides in a court. So you've got wedge there, which is a wedge tomb, and you've got a court, which is a court, Kieran, and you have to take the long walk now down the passage, and to get through that passage, you have to go through the doorway, which is another word for portal. So you've got portal dolmen, you've passage grave or passage tomb, you have your wedge tomb, and you have your court, Kieran. You have all those in that little story, but they're key words. But even that little word, like if you say the court,
The
Kieran,
visualisation of that, though, is really helpful. And that's, again, a strategy you can apply right across the board.
Exactly. It's a lovely... And the reason I do it is because I don't have that magical power some people have, that they can just remember things. I have to do that.
It's a busy paper. There's a lot to cover in it. What is the advice around it? Like, what are they looking for from those answers?
Okay, so with and I think the examination has improved big time. I think the new changes, genuinely, I think the lovely changes have been made. They've made the exam more connected to practical art, and that you understand the language of art. If I was to open up a car, and I know very little about cars, and if I was to start pointing at different, parts of the engine block and, the battery, after I get lost very quickly. That's the thing that makes it go whiz bang, whatever it might be. In art, there are particular language you need to be able to use. You need to be able to talk about the art elements and design principles. So no matter what question you're doing, you must be able to talk about the art elements and design principles, and your teacher will cover this with you. The teacher will talk about these things. So for example, you got obviously with art elements, you've your line, color, tone, texture, shape and pattern, and obviously with your design principles, you've got composition, balance, symmetry, maybe rhythm, contrast, linear perspective, for example. Those are kind of design principles. So once you're able to apply those to anything, so you just have to be able to, whatever image you might come across, that you can use the language of art.
So you're approaching the paper with enthusiasm, you're drawing in all that, but there are key terms, and it's technical as well.
Yes. I mean, the simplest way of thinking about anything in visual studies, which we call now art history, is to think good old-fashioned, where, when, how, why, you have to get what. Those basic questions, apply them to anything. Who made it? When did they make it? Why did they make it? So that's if you can answer those kinds of questions, that's a way of, again, accessing those art elements and design principles. Okay,
final tip for art students as they prepare for that written exam?
I would say in the written exam, stay till the end.
Really?
Don't leave early. I promise, it sounds like a long time to say 2.5 hours. It is incredibly fast. It flies by. Stay in, take the whole time available, use your colouring pencils and your diagrams, but yeah, stay in, do the exam to its completion.
Okay, I have a rapid fire question for the three of you.
Okay.
Shane, what is the joy of Donegaeilge Pauper, though, in your view? Inspire them.
I think it gives people a great opportunity to express their language and show the skills that they've developed over 14 years. You use it as a platform, show what you have, and enjoy what you do. Really, that's the main thing with it.
10 out of 10 for you. Come to you last, Declan. Kieran Mills, the joy of doing physics, the joy of this exam for students.
Well, it's also
who are at the
called
moment
natural.
in their rooms going, oh.
Yeah, well, it's also called natural philosophy. So you're exploring the universe. You're trying to understand the universe. Things like gravity and electricity. So it's absolutely fascinating. I don't just teach it to the exam. I like to try and inspire, and students who love physics, they want to ask the questions anyway. Obviously, we have to prepare them for the course,
sure, but
we go outside that as well. So it's a fantastic subject for anybody to study.
Declan, art, come on.
Art. They get to explore themselves. I mean, they get to know who they are and what they're about, and they do that through other people's creations.
There you go. Can't ask for better than that then on Study Hub. My thanks to the three of you for joining us for Study Hub this week. This was episode 6. Can we encourage you to check out our socials? We also stream. We've YouTube Shorts for Study Hub. You can watch us as well as listen to us. Next week we have Maths Higher Paper 2, Spanish and Economics. A busy week for us next week. So until the next episode, I've been Evan O'Rourke. Agus slán go fóill.